Oh my God, hello. It feels like it's been about 7.5 years since I've done anything on YouTube, but you know, always time to restart anything. I have been thinking a lot over the last year after listening to like 8 billion podcasts about wanting to start a podcast. But like, until then, I'm just interviewing people when I can, when they're willing to talk to me, and putting them on here for now, which I thought was good enough because now we get the video and you guys can kind of watch or listen whenever you want to. And yeah, so that's what we're doing. I'm really excited, and I was so lucky because the first person I was able to interview was Tony Gentilcore, who you may have not heard of, which is the kind of the whole purpose of this entire series. So my goal right now really is to start connecting you guys to men in the fitness industry, because I know that my demographic is like 70% women, and I know that I get so much of my information from these men in the fitness industry because I know that they are trustworthy and they really know their stuff when it comes to strength and conditioning and fitness and results and nutrition and all of these things, right? And when there's so much crap on social media, it's really easy to not know who to go to, or to feel like you're trying to pull something from like so many different people. So I figured if you guys trust me and I trust these people, then I would love to introduce you to them, even though they're so well known, they don't really need introduction. But for the sake of putting them in front of you, I thought it could be fun and just a good way for me to check in with you guys, see how you're doing, and see if there's anyone else that you want me to talk to or get information from. So Tony is so nice, and he's been in the industry for like over 10 years. He's a strength and conditioning coach. He has written for Women's Health, Men's Health, T Nation. He is very well known in the fitness industry, and he is co-owner of Cressy Sports in Boston. And he just sat down with me and talked to me for an hour, and some of the questions that I had were revolving around a couple things. So the first half of the interview, which you can see in the timestamp below, is us kind of going over what he thinks that certain trainers should be focusing on and how he got to where he was, because that's a big part of these interviews for me as well. Is if these men or these people in the fitness industry are doing such a good job of kind of diversifying themselves through the industry, whether it's in seminars or online training and in-person training and whatever, I want to know how they did that. And I think that it's cool to be able to pick their brains and just pull motivation from them and their discipline and all of that stuff. So that's kind of how the first half of it goes. And then in the second half, we get into why women should be doing strength training and the kind of results that he's seen from all of his women clients doing strength training, and how to kind of get us out of the mindset of strength training is going to make you bulky. We go over the benefits of strength training and how it works, and where we think cardio lands in that equation. Also, we go over his one resource at the end for what he suggests to personal trainers and women who are interested in training. So I loved his recommendation, by the way. I'm in the middle of doing it, so that made me happy. But yeah, I really hope you guys enjoy this. Let me know what you think. I have some more planned. And if there's any questions or things that you specifically want me to ask, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an interview. And I will see you guys on the next video. Okay, ciao. My demographic is mainly women, and they're always hearing from me. And especially in strength training, I feel like it's easy for women to kind of separate the differences between how women train and how men train, and not really understanding that it's kind of all the same for the genders across the board.
Yes,
right?
I completely agree on that point. And it's funny because I often I try to connect the women I work with and the female trainers in my network to more women coaches in the industry. So this is a fortuitous combining of the minds today.
Amazing. Okay, cool. Makes me happy. So I want to start obviously by saying that you've been co-founder of Cressy Gym in Massachusetts for over a decade, right?
Yeah, well, we opened up Cressy Sports Performance in 2007. It was myself, Eric Cressy, Pete Dupuis. Before that, I was a run-of-the-mill personal trainer, working in corporate fitness and commercial fitness for 5 years leading up to that. So in numerous commercial gyms in New York. I'm originally from New York. I don't have a Massachusetts accent.
Oh, you don't?
uh, but surprisingly, there's plenty of people who grew up in the Boston area that don't have the movie Massachusetts accent. It's quite weird that it exists, of course. But anyway, that's a digression.
No, that's
But I started the industry in 2007. We opened up Cressy Sports Performance in 2000, or I'm sorry, I started the industry in 2002. And then we opened up Cressy Sports Performance in 2007. And I was there from 2007 to 2015. And I left to kind of pursue and do my own thing here in Boston. So I was a strength coach there for 8 years. I'm still considered a co-founder, of course. I still am in contact with both Eric and Pete, and we're involved in each other's lives. But we've all put on our big boy pants. We're all three of us are married. We all have kids. We all have our respective careers. So certainly we don't keep tabs on each other as much as we used to. But yes, I've worked with women all through my career, even before Cressy Sports Performance. And of course, while there, even though we were known as more of a strength and conditioning sports performance facility, we certainly had many women who worked with us. Some of them were the wives of baseball players, and some were respective athletes themselves. So, and even now, I would say 60% of my clients now are women. So, it's, it makes sense. I mean, half the population is women. So,
It's crazy.
so it's inevitable that it's going to happen. But I agree with you that, I'm often asked, like, what is the difference between training an athlete and a Gen Pop client, or even what's the difference between training a man and a woman? In both scenarios, I often say very little. It's really, in all four scenarios, they are lifting weights, they're doing hinge movements, they're doing squat movements, they're pushing stuff, they're pulling stuff, they're throwing stuff, they're carrying stuff. It's just the variation that's different, depending on their goals and their injury history and their unique in their ability level. So really, there's no differentiation.
Right.
Anyone who walks into my studio here in Boston and they see a dude training and a woman training, they're going to see much of the same thing,
Right.
which I dig. So it sounds like we're both on the same page, of course.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how I feel. I want to back up just a tiny bit.
Sure. Yep.
Whoever's listening, just a little more background on why you got started doing fitness. Like, did you always feel really drawn to fitness? Did you know that?
Yes. I'm a bit of an anomaly in my family. Because I'm the only one in my immediate family who grew up or really kind of gravitated towards a health conscientious type of thinking. Like it's weird. I don't know where I got it or why I got it, but I certainly, I don't remember not having that be part of my psyche. I think a lot of it stemmed from the fact that I grew up in an era where there was no internet, very limited cable TV. So I was playing sports quite often as a young child. And I grew up, I joke about this, but I'm kind of serious. I grew up watching a lot of Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. So, growing up watching Predator and Commando and Rocky, I watched those movies many times. So, those dudes were pretty big, and I was like, oh, I wonder how they got looking like that. And of course, they lifted weights, and I got my first weight set when I think when I was 13, and I just it was down in my basement. It came with a poster. I just followed the poster and just did my thing. And I knew early on that baseball was going to be my sport of choice, and I just kind of instinctively and intuitively was like, I bet if I got stronger that I'd probably be a better baseball player. I could hit the ball farther, I could throw the ball harder. So I spent, I was one of the rare breeds in my high school growing up. When I say it was a dungeon, it was a dungeon. Like, the weight room was a very dark, rusty, dingy weight room, which I loved. I even love now. I love when I get to work out in facilities like that. But I used to stay after school, lift weights, and I didn't, looking back, I had no idea what I was doing. I was just kind of like, I'll just lift these things. And I did it in the under the guise or under the umbrella that I wanted to be a better athlete, better baseball player. And that led to me earning a scholarship to play at the collegiate level. Not many kids from my hometown. I'm from a very, very small town in New York. So there weren't many kids in my hometown that went on to play at the collegiate level. So that was kind of a big deal. And then, that led to just me pursuing it as a career. Like I didn't grow up thinking, yeah, I want to be a personal trainer or I want to be a strength and conditioning coach. It just kind of naturally ended up that way because I did not end up playing baseball past the collegiate level. I had aspirations of doing that, but I didn't. And once I was done playing baseball, I was like, oh, I actually have to get a degree now. So what am I going to do? And I transferred back to a school that was closer to home. It was a health education major for 3 years. I was going to actually become a health teacher. But I also had a concentration in health wellness promotion. So after I got done doing my student teaching, which I had to do a middle school placement and a high school placement, for my concentration, I ended up getting an internship at a corporate gym just outside of Syracuse, New York. And I worked there for an entire summer. So we're 2-3 months, just kind of working in a gym setting. And they ended up hiring me right away. When I was done, they hired me. It just so happened there was a job opening. So I was like, I could put on a tie every day and teach sex education to 7th graders. Not quite the glamorous life. Well, I'm not saying it isn't, or I could wear sweatpants to work every day and have people squat and deadlift. So it was kind of a no-brainer at that point. And that's the route I ended up going.
Did you find it so you played baseball, and then once you started getting into training and personal training, did you feel like you had a better understanding of how to train people, or when?
Hell no. No.
Really better at,
I would say I would never dismiss or bemoan my formal education. I went to SUNY Cortland, which is a state school in New York. And of course, you learn all the basics like human anatomy, exercise physiology, biology. Those are all stuff that we all need to take and learn to have the foundation. But I remember when I started training people, I was like, what the fuck am I doing? You're in a textbook for 3-4, in my case, 5+ years. And then all of a sudden you have a live human being sitting next to you or standing there waiting, okay, what are we going to do? And they're relying on you to give them, a bona fide training session. And I remember being like, I don't know what I'm doing. And, but I will say that, so we're talking 2002, I took it upon myself to educate myself further, and that was kind of at the point where I started finding these training forums and like Men's Health Online and Testosterone Magazine or TNation.com and Bodybuilding.com, and started going into the forums and just kind of like reading and participating in these internet forums, and just started seeing the same books being recommended and the same resources being recommended. Just went out of my way to read as much as I could, that stuff that interests me. But certainly too, I just think having, being thrown to the gauntlet and just getting hands-on experience is how you get better. In the initial stages, I think anyone who, even if they, you can get all the schooling in the world and read every textbook, but until you actually start implementing it with an actual person, it doesn't really mean anything. So, it's just a stepping stone for everyone in the industry. I mean, I think everyone goes through that process. Yeah. And I think it's completely normal. But I think it behooves, I think those fitness professionals will end up making it a career. and end up, doing well in this industry are those that are a little bit more, take a little bit more initiative with their education. That really never ends. I mean, I've been, especially early in my career when I was working in commercial gyms. I mean, I remember having conversations with other trainers who, I was like, oh, I'm reading this book or that book, and they'd be like, oh, I've already learned what I need to learn. I don't need to learn anymore. I mean, they're like, in verbatim, that's what they said. And in my head, I would just be like, the fuck, like, like, I just thought they were just like pompous jerks, and didn't just like, I have a full roster of clients. I don't need to learn anymore. And I just really didn't obviously I didn't respect or gravitate to that same train of thought. So, but I do think in the long term, any professional that wants to do well, like they'll just naturally kind of seek out their own informal education.
Right. I mean, I obviously heard about you through Chris Hitchcock, Show Up Fitness, and so I went through him to get started with taking training more seriously, and I feel really grateful for that because of not only him connecting me and to people like you and people who are educated and who take the time and know things, but just for kind of giving us that opportunity to learn more, obviously, before training and kind of being humble in that sense. But I always appreciated that because I use Show Up Fitness as like my mentor and my guidance. And that's kind of where I got my confidence with training and like my desire to continue learning. And the knowledge that I'm like this small in the fitness industry, and like there's so much room to grow. So for you at that point, when you were just like, okay, I'm going to take it upon myself to start reading and finding articles and things like that, did you have a mentor in mind or somebody that you really admired? You go from
actually, no. Like I remember being flabbergasted when like I was at my internship, and then there's quite a bit of downtime in that internship. It wasn't a commercial gym, so it wasn't like there was like a steady stream of patrons walking into it. It wasn't like that. So there was quite a bit of downtime, and of course I would just get on the computer to pass time, and started getting on these internet forums like I alluded to earlier. And that was like blowing my mind. I didn't even know these things existed. And I mean, we chuckle at that now because that's, it's like, I don't even think forums exist now. Like, like we're so like the internet, like with social media, like that's like no one really outside of Reddit, no one really goes into a forum anymore. But back then I was like really like, holy shit, like this is a whole new world. Like this stuff exists. And, I started reading every article on tnation.com and like being like, oh my God, this is amazing. And this is like early, like John Berardi, and like, Christian Thibodeau, Chad Waterbury, and Charles Poliquin, and all these like Mount Rushmore of coaches. And, but I can't say I had a mentor personally early in my career. It eventually ended up being Eric. I mean, he and I met via internet forums. It sounds weird to say that now, but, it was a funny anecdote to that is like at my wedding, when my wife and I got married, of course, Eric and Pete were both in part of my wedding party. And another good friend of mine, Dean Somerset, who you might be familiar with, I'm sure. He also was part of my wedding party. So those three guys were part of my party. So, and I remember during the reception, they were all like doing their little like Tony spiel. And all three of them, I met all three of those guys online. I met my wife online, like on Match.com. So it was like this like running theme of like Tony meeting people online. I was like, I meet people in real life too, but
like very good like character traits for meeting people online.
Well, back like I said early, like in the early 2000s, it was still kind of sort of weird to be like meeting people online, and like that wasn't like what it is now. But I was lucky to, cross paths with Eric, and, I would read stuff he was saying, he was reading stuff I was saying. We found that we had a lot of similar ideas and similar ways of thinking, and, similar ways of just kind of like handling people. Like we weren't being jerks online. Like we weren't trying to be like mean or, trying to be constructive and trying to learn as much as we could. And then eventually, he got a job in Connecticut, once he graduated from University of Connecticut. And then, he said, hey, this place I got a job at, they're looking for another trainer. I know you're looking to get out of Central New York. This might be an opportunity. So I went and interviewed, and they liked me. And, I had that weird conversation with my mom. I was like, hey, I'm moving to Connecticut with a dude I met on the internet. It was a weird conversation, but I would say, early in my career, and even now, like, he's definitely been a huge mentor. But then eventually, mentors that started, like, it was like Dan John, it was Mike Boyle, those type of, I just started reading, and you just see the same names popping up over and over again. And eventually you just start reading their content and being like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And obviously they're getting results. And but yeah, as far as like an in-person mentor early in my career, I really didn't have one. It was really all just my own.
I just find that so impressive to like be so lost and then to educate yourself and then turn into being one of the most like profound writers within the fitness.
Well, profound's a big strong, but
very known, I should say.
But I mean, it's not lost on me. Like, looking about where I started to where I am now, like, certainly I've been very fortunate in being in this industry and being able to do what I do. And, I have clients that I love working with. I get to travel the world and present, which has been a great opportunity. But certainly I'm not, I in my own head, I'm always someone that's like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, it's no, but certainly it takes work. I mean, many times I'll get emails or direct messages from young trainers asking, well, what do I have to do to get to where you are? And I'm like, well, like, ask me that same question in 10, 15 years. Like, experience, there's really nothing that trumps experience. And, just being, I hate saying it because I know it's so cliche, but being in the trenches, working with actual people. Because like I said earlier, you can have all the textbook smarts you want in the world, but unless you're actually applying it to, real life people, then you're really not going to be able to contextualize it and see what works and what doesn't work, and what you like and fits your own philosophical model and what doesn't. So,
and are you still training people in person now, right?
Yes. So I've been very lucky. Like, of course, I had to shut down my studio for 3 months last year at the early, like a year ago now is like when we had to shut down. But I was able to open back up with limited occupancy late last June. But it was very fortunate because my studio is a pretty small studio. So even with limitations, like, it's still more or less full capacity. So I follow a semi-private format. So I don't just train people one-on-one. I do all the assessments one-on-one, but then once they're kind of in the system, so to speak, they get their own program, but then they are training alongside 2 or 3 other individuals in that hour 15 minutes. They're working off their program, and I'm just coaching them through that program. So, normally I would have 3 to 4 people in there per hour. Since the pandemic and since I've been able to operate through it, I limit it to 2. Okay. And now it's just sort of kind of starting to get to the point where every now and then I can have a third person in there. Because I have several clients who have been vaccinated already, and then now that the weather's getting nicer, the door can be open, so there's more ventilation. People are just getting a little less skittish of being indoors with other individuals, and everyone's wearing a mask. And thankfully there's been no like transmission or anything weird going on. So
it's like such a crazy time for that. So I wanted to ask, as far as the training side of things go, before I kind of want to dive in on the women in particular, since you have been people in person for so long, and you've been in the industry for quite some time. I'm curious, like, what do you find that trainers these days are doing that is probably not going to get them on the right track of like having the success that they're looking for? Like, is there something that clients or that trainers are doing right now that you feel like they're kind of just doing wrong?
Um, I wouldn't go that far. I think everyone has to go through their own journey. And like I said, in terms of learning what works, what doesn't work, and trial and error, and just being exposed to a multitude of different people, different backgrounds, different injury histories. I think in today's day and age, and this is going to be where I'm going to sound like a cantankerous old like strength coach. I think with social media, I think there's this connotation that, like likes and follows and social media gravitas equates to success in the industry. And I would caution that is not the case. I think, I get it. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I think we're like, I'm human too. Like, we all get kind of sucked into like the utopia of, oh my God, I have so many followers and these people liking my stuff. Um, but that doesn't really necessarily equate to your bank account. Uh, and success, this is me. I'm not implying that success is only monetary. Um, but, uh, but in terms of being able to pay your bills and have revenue streams and stuff like that, like social media can certainly help. Don't get me wrong. I have many friends and colleagues who blow me away when it comes to social media exposure and whatnot that do very well. But I would caution today's younger trainers to think that getting a massive following on any social media platform is the key to success in this industry, because I don't think that is the right track at all.
Totally. Well, I mean, it goes back kind of to what you said earlier of just focus on learning and finding out like what your mistakes are and where you are uncomfortable and just trying to get better at those things. And I think when you focus on all of that and are like willing to continue to grow, like I feel that you gain this kind of knowledge that clients will sort of see, right? And
Well,
then
sure. I mean, it's at the end of the day, you have to get your clients results. And I think you would agree that your greatest marketing team are your clients. It's like they're the ones that are referring me, their other family members, their friends, their colleagues. And I always try to instill in trainers, like your goal shouldn't be so much to like, okay, how many more people do I have to entice to sign on this month? But if you're keeping your 5, 10, 15, 20 clients, current clients happy, and getting them results, and I'd rather have a core group of 20 clients like that stay with me forever than worrying about like constantly like grooming or recruiting other ones into the mix. And I would say if I mean, then that begs the question, like, if you're the type of trainer who has a lot of turnover with clients, like, what does that mean? Like, sure, you're quote unquote getting a lot of clients, but none of them are staying. So what does that mean? I mean, that could be more so the fact of like maybe the business model of wherever they work. But if you're doing your own thing and you have a ton of turnover, I'd be like, maybe it's a messaging issue, maybe it's a coaching issue, who knows? But yeah, like in terms of like, I mean, there's so many factors that come into play when it comes to, the client trainer rapport. My wife's the psychologist. I mean, I've actually like learned a lot from her in the past. We've been together over a decade. So, I used to be, we're just going to squat and deadlift. Like, what's wrong? Let's just do it. And, it's more complicated than that. Like when it comes to motivation, the self-determination theory comes into play. So building someone's autonomy, building someone's confidence, being relatable. There's a lot of psychological or soft skills that come into play when it comes to success as a coach. I mean, yes, by all means, the book smarts matter. Being able to get results matters. Being able to break down squat technique or hip assessment matter. But certainly those soft skills, just being able to have a regular conversation with somebody matter as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. Speaking of like having those soft skills and kind of being able to communicate and relate to people, as you have obviously trained men and you've trained women and you've trained athletes and you've trained general population, what do you say to the woman who is really afraid to get bulky and she's really looking
Sure.
to lose fat and she wants to build her body and she knows exactly what she wants to look like? She's showing you the photos and you know what the answer is, but she won't let you give her weights. Is there a way that you're able to kind of explain that to?
There's a few ways to approach this. This is a great example because I would say early in my career, I would always try to win the argument. So I'd have a woman come in, and mind you, like I think that's less prevalent now than it used to be. That mentality still exists, of course, like that it's never going to go away, but certainly less of a thing now. But early in my career, I would always try to win these arguments, or not. I shouldn't say argument. I would just try to win. Right. So I would, a woman will come in and be like, "Oh man, I want to work with you," and then, but I don't want to lift weights because I'm going to get big and bulky. And of course, my insides would just roll its eyes no, like you wouldn't believe. And I would kind of like exude that as well. So that was a big mistake. And then I would go into this diatribe about, well, men have more testosterone, their hormonal profiles are this, and you're not a man, and it's impossible, and and that just goes in one ear and out the other. Like, I mean, everyone knows that. Like, and and then eventually it just dawned on me, like, I'm not doing anyone any favors by just playing that card. And I guess mansplaining to a degree, like that doesn't, it didn't work. So then I started being like, okay, well, how can what's a better way for me to approach this? So a lot of times it's just digging deeper. So whenever I have a woman come to me now who says that, like, oh, I don't want to get big and bulky, by lifting weights, I'll say, well, like, have you experienced this in the past? Like, is this something that's happened in the past? Or is this something that, like, maybe a prior trainer that you worked with said to you? Why was getting big and bulky a bad thing? Just try to get her to kind of divulge a little bit more information of like what she's thinking. And then it just comes down to being a little bit tricky. So it's funny, like you might have had the same experience where, you put a straight bar on the floor and put plates on it and ask some women to deadlift that. They're going to be like, no, I don't want to do that. But then you slide it into a landmine and then put a weight on one side and then have say, oh, let's deadlift. Oh, okay, yeah, this is cool. Or maybe have them like lift a kettlebell off the floor. It's still a deadlift. It's just not a barbell that they see on YouTube with like these big ginormous dudes lifting. So sometimes just changing the context of what is lifting heavy comes into play. Right. So a lot of it's just going to be education, and a lot of it's just going to be patience and listening to them, because it's about them, not me. And then of coursing. I learned this trick from my wife, who would say, I would just of course them. So they would say, I don't want to get big and bulky. So instead of me saying, well, that's bullshit, hormones and blah, blah, I would just be, of course you don't want to get big and bulky. You don't want to just have these massive muscles and like get and look that way. And I get it. Of course. Who wants that? But then say, well, I do think this is, here's your goal. Like, we know what your goals have to be. You know what your goals are. I've worked with many women in the past who've had a lot of success with this, and let's find a small performance-based goal to start off with. Maybe it's to do, I don't know, one strict unassisted chin up, or maybe it's to do 10 clean push-ups, like chest to the floor. Let's find a goal and let's just train towards that, because I often find the biggest thing is having them, this is a male or female, latch onto a performance-based goal. I think the goal setting tends to be too vague, where they're like, oh, I just want to lose weight, or I want to lose fat. I'm like, that's too vague. We need something a little bit more specific. Like I said, like unassisted chin up, or you want to be able to squat X amount of weight or whatever. And I often find that goal, if it's a performance-based goal, provides more intent and purpose with their program and their training. And then a lot of their aesthetic goals will just kind of miraculously happen because they're working hard to attain that goal.
Right.
And I often tell people, like, this is important because if your goals are too vague, if your goal is too vague, I don't want to get big and bulky. Okay, well, that's not a goal. that's kind of like a feeling more than it is a goal. You get, if you kind of sort of train, you're going to get kind of sort of results. So I have to find just really instilling on them and getting that, like, latching onto a performance-based goal tends to help quite a bit. And oftentimes once they see that they're doing something a month or 2 or 3 down the road that they couldn't do on day one, say they finally hit that chin up, or they're performing a goblet squat pain-free. It used to bother their knee and now it doesn't. Maybe they're postpartum and they had some diastasis they're working on, and we kind of closed that a little bit because we're working on their core training. Once they see some form of progress and they say, oh, I'm doing stuff now that I couldn't do weeks ago or months ago, it's like, I love it when they flip that switch. Yes. And then they're like, well, what can I do next? Or what can we do now? And it's pretty cool.
I also love that part. Like, I primarily work with women, and it's cool when they can kind of peel the shades back and just say, like, okay. And then I tell them, like, hey, like, do you know that you used to only be able to hip thrust 95 and today we just did 130? Like,
yeah,
huge. That's awesome. And then they get excited, and then you're right. It does kind of turn into, like, let's see if I can get a little bit more. And then suddenly they're like, oh my God, I've noticed my butt looks really good, or whatever it is, and you're like, amazing. Like, everything's coming together. This is awesome. So yeah, I love that. Makes training so fun for me,
Mm-hmm. That's what makes our job very rewarding is stuff. I mean, you and I both know it's assuming they're going to be consistent, it's going to happen. There's a term that I've championed. I did not come up with it originally, and I honestly forgot where I heard it first, but because there's always the conversation about, well, how many days a week should I be training for this goal, or how many sets and reps should I be doing? I get this from trainers too, because especially when I do a workshop and I start talking about, like, these drills to improve upward rotation, or these drills to work with extension-based back pain, or here's how you improve hip mobility, whatever. So trainers get this question too: how many sets and reps of that should I be doing? But when I'm working with new clients, and especially women, they'll say, I don't know how many days I have to train, etc. I'll say the goal is 3 by 52. So
nice.
If we get you to train 3 days a week, 52 weeks out of the year, doing something, and you're consistent with that, and that something is what we do, is where we as coaches come in. So again, this is me saying, okay, is it my expectation that every woman that I work with has to deadlift with a straight bar off the floor? Fuck no. Like, that is not my expectation. Very rarely are they going to be a competitive powerlifter, and those are the only people that need to train with a straight bar off the floor. They have to be able to do that's part of their sport. Have I worked with women who are powerlifters? Yes, of course. But there are many ways we can accomplish a deadlift. We can elevate it. We can do a trap bar. We can do it off a landmine. We can use the kettlebell. We can use dumbbells. And the same thing with squatting. There are many iterations of squatting we can use. So it's finding, like, what fills their love tank, with their training love tank. What's going to get them jazzed up to train. And it's that 3 by 52 formula. Because at the end of the day, if they're doing that, I mean, some good stuff is going to happen.
Of course. Yeah, that consistency is really where they're going to see those results finally. When they ask you about cardio, how much cardio should I be doing? How important is cardio? What kind of answers?
So I usually I might have gotten this from Ben Bruno, my buddy Ben, who's out in LA. He would say, like, think of, this, you have this goal, you have this aesthetic goal, this fat loss goal, and we all know that the strength training component is strength training is what gives body shape and contour. So to me, and really what makes people bulky is the fat that's covering their muscles. There's definitely a conversation to be had there with nutrition and their diet, and which I admittedly do not touch with a 10-foot pole. That is not my area of expertise. That is not my scope of practice. Can I talk basics with my clients? Of course. Like, hey, what are you doing for breakfast? Well, maybe try this. What are you doing? But once we start asking specifics, then it's like, okay, well, I'm going to refer you to other colleagues of mine in the area who are dietitians, or maybe they're a precision nutrition coach, and they can help you there. But of course, I'm biased towards strength training. I think strength training is kind of like the main course of weight loss, fat loss, etc. Because that's what you want. The more muscle you have, it takes up less space than fat does. But it's also more metabolically active tissue, so you're actually burning more calories the more muscle you have. And not to mention, like, where is the muscle? Most women are not going to complain about putting muscle on their hamstrings and their glutes, but they might not really be a fan of it on their thighs and their quads. So, okay, well, we're going to deadlift, we're going to hip thrusts, we're going to do RDLs, we're going to do pull throughs. We're gonna do chin ups, stuff like that. We'll just stay away from stuff that's gonna make your jeans super tight. Like, we're not gonna do heavy squats or really deep squats, or every now and then maybe. But I often say, like, the strength training is the big plate, and the cardio or Pilates classes or yoga classes or anything like that, it's kind of like the cherry on top of the sundae. Like, once you get your strength training sessions done 3 days a week, you want to go to a spin class, go to a spin class. You want to go for a jog, go for a jog. I'm not going to tell someone no. That is physical activity. Of course, it's going to be good for them. It's going to be, do it. But in terms of the total number, that's going to depend, of course, but, twice a week, fine. Like, if you want to go for a swim, you want to go hiking, by all means do it. I just don't think it should be the main gig.
Right.
I think the strength training, and when I say strength training, it doesn't mean we're training super heavy. I definitely like working up to maybe heavy sets of 5, maybe heavy sets of 3 on certain exercises. But then I'm going to be doing finishers and metabolic strength training, or you are going to get your heart rate up. This is why we can use giant sets and supersets and finishers and stuff like that. But the yoga, Pilates, spin class are important. Heart health is important. There's a lot of benefits to cardiovascular exercise other than burning calories. But in terms of like how often they should do it or prioritize it, I say once you get your 3 strength training sessions in, then by all means do whatever fits your schedule.
I love that answer. Yeah. So I know 2 girls popped in my head when you had mentioned, the person that's like, I don't want to get my jeans fitting really tight in the front of my legs kind of person. So 2 girls popped in my head. One is the girl that needs to lose 30 pounds, and the other is the girl who's already fit and is focusing on just like strength gains in certain areas. So for the person that needs to lose 30 pounds, would you say that isn't really going to be a factor, like focusing on the squats and focusing on the lunges and more knee dominant?
I still, to me, if it's somebody who actually has to lose 30 pounds or wants to lose 30 pounds and it's actually healthy to lose 30 pounds, I'm still going to have her squat and deadlift. I might change the variation because I feel like those are because at the end of the day, I want them to stress exercises that are going to help them burn the most amount of calories possible within a session. And of course, I think multi-joint compound exercises that force you to lift appreciable weight help you do that. And I don't think I don't stress it too much in the beginning. I mean, once they get to the point where all my jeans are even tighter, then yeah, well, I might just change the variation. We can make it a little bit more hip dominant squat or anything like that. But I still would encourage her to say, hey, we are still going to do these exercises, but we're not going to go very heavy, or at least like powerlifting heavy. We're just going to go like mid ranges. No, I just think from a caloric expenditure standpoint, it's still important because that is her goal, is to do that.
Right.
And also, I think a common mistake that women and men make both, even if the goal is fat loss, I do think strength training, where we are lifting appreciable weight, is important because it reminds the body to keep muscle. So we want to keep as much muscles, because remember, the muscle is what gives our body like, oh, wow, it looked good. Like that gives the body shape and contour. What we want to lose is the fat.
Right.
So I find that when fat loss is the goal, people tend to like really ramp up their training volume. They're doing high reps of everything, and they're doing like very like 30 rep sets of this and that, and they're doing every minute on the minute. And I do think a major mistake a lot of people make is that they don't lift appreciable weight, at least maybe in the first first 15 or 20 minutes of their session. Like, let's work up to a heavy-ish deadlift, let's work up to a heavy-ish squat, just to remind the body like, hey, we want to keep this muscle, and hopefully just the bulk of your weight loss is actually fat loss.
Right.
I do think, even from a fat loss standpoint, that strength training should be a big component of the process.
Yeah. When it comes to going heavier, like what I've kind of noticed with my clients is that heavy to them sometimes is anything over 5 pounds or over 10 pounds. It's what they're used to using, but then I'll give them maybe 2 15s and they can do 15 reverse lunges, absolutely no problem. But they feel like it's so heavy. But I'm like, you just did 15 reps. Like that's a high amount of reps for the weight that you're using. Like you could easily actually go up and do less reps, but to them, it's like, it's way too heavy. There's that. And then there's like, I've noticed a lot of girls that I've done hip thrusts with, they want to go until they feel the burn. And if they're not feeling the burn, like on days where I had clients for months and I was getting them into that 5 rep range, maybe 8 reps, they would tell me like, oh yeah, I did it, but I didn't really feel it. Like, I don't feel it like I do when I feel the 20 reps. Can we just go down so that we can I want to feel the burn kind of thing. So can you quickly kind of remind us why those higher reps sometimes don't always equate to the results?
Well, it's the goal. Like the lower reps is going to be more of like the strength based end of the spectrum. The higher reps is going to be more so for caloric burn, endurance, etc. I think do both. Like I'm there with you. I think we should be doing both, and it's just our job as a trainer to educate them. This is why we're doing the heavier sets first, and then at the end of the session, I'm going to burn out your glutes, because I think that's important. That's an important point to remember. Like, they're hiring you to get them results, and we know what's going to help them get there. But at the same time, we want to make them happy. And if someone, to me, if I have a female client who really loves feeling her glutes burn, and she feels it's an inadequate session if she doesn't feel that, I'm going to say, we're going to do the program. So we're going to 5 sets of 5 at 185 hip thrusts. I mean, we're not going to feel, if I want to get her to feel a burn, I'd have her do an isometric hold, stuff like that. Yeah. But then at the end of the session, I often will say, okay, we'll have a 5 to 10 minute window at the end of your session where we will do a glute burn. I call it badonkadonk training. We're just going to do badonkadonk, and we're just going to get after it. You're going to walk out waddling. Awesome. And if they leaving, I don't care. Like, right. It's their session. Right. So, it's certainly, again, it's our job to educate them. Okay, here's the why of why we are doing these heavier lows, appreciable weight, because you need to force the body to adapt and change. And you're not going to do that with 5 pounds. Your purse weighs more than that. and sometimes if you just contextualize it like that, it's like, oh yeah, that okay. And not to mention, you can even say, how much does your 3-year-old weigh? Like 30, 35 pounds? Like, and you're telling me that 20 is heavy? Come on.
Right.
Like, it's just stuff like that. If you just do it like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So I think it comes down to the goal. Okay, the goal is to keep the goal the goal. That's a Dan John quote. Okay, if your goal is to, have a nice butt and lose a little fat and look a little bit better, like we're going to have to do some heavy-ish hip thrusts. We're going to have to do some, some deadlifts and this and that. And then at the end of the session, if she wants her glutes to burn, I'll make them burn. That's fine with me.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. That makes sense. I mean, I do the same thing. It's funny how it's always kind of coming up in conversation.
And what I'll just say too, like, with strength, if you really want to simplify like the rep conversation, if I'll tell people like, okay, we'll just use 3 sets of 10. Just because that's the most familiar to everyone. Yeah. I'll tell somebody like, listen, if an exercise calls for 3 sets of 10, you shouldn't be able to do 20. Like, you shouldn't be able to do 15. Like, I want to make it so you can maybe get 12. Like, we'll call like, reps in reserve or whatever you want to call it. But I'll say if an exercise calls for 3 sets of 10, if you can't do at least 8, it's too heavy. But if you can do 12 or more, it's too light.
That's perfect. Yeah.
And if you really just want to simplify it, that's all you have to do. Because then you're right. If it calls for 3 sets of 10 and they grab 10-pound dumbbells and they can do 25 reps because they want to feel, it's like, no, that's too light. Sorry. Like,
I'm really happy that you brought that up, because sometimes I wonder with these women or anyone really who just isn't, educated on this stuff, if they're downloading a quick fitness app and it says 3 sets of 10, they just grab whatever weight they have and they just do 10. And sometimes I feel like most of the time, a lot of people don't understand, like, oh, if I can do more, should I do more? Is this 10 for a reason? Does it matter what weight I use? Like, what's the difference? So I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think it's important for people to know, like, 3 sets of 10 reps means that you literally can't do more than 10 reps, or you can barely do more than 10 reps.
Yeah. Like I always like to say, you want to leave like 1 or 2 reps left in the tank. Cause I'm also not a fan of, cause on the other end of the spectrum, you have those people who feel like they have to train to failure on everything.
Right.
And I'm not a fan of that either. So, I always encourage people to, and it takes time to learn it, cause they've never really pushed themselves to that degree, but you want to leave about 1 or 2 reps left in the tank, because that way, then by the time when you do get to your last set and those last few reps, like those may be grinders,
Right.
And it shouldn't. But yeah, you're right. It shouldn't be like do sets of 10 and then. But yeah, I could have done 10 more at that weight. Then that's way too light.
Yeah. So I want to be respectful of your time. I really do think I could talk to you for 2.5 hours.
I know, it's a fun conversation to have. Yeah.
Just 2 questions before
Sure.
if you don't mind. I wanted to get your thoughts on creatine for women, and then also just a book or a resource that you recommend for anyone interested in fitness.
So creatine for women gets 2 thumbs up from me. I think it's the most researched supplement in human history. It works for both men and women. There's certain differences in our anatomy, of course. But when it comes to strength and conditioning and performance, the human body is the human body. So creatine, can we make a case that, yeah, there's going to be some water weight gain, or there's going to be this and that in the initial stages? Yes, for both sexes, that's just the case. But if your goal is to improve your strength endurance and your strength in general, and power output, and just performance, like explosiveness, not endurance stuff, but we're talking about more performance, like short bursts of energy. Creatine is hands down the supplement to take. I have colleagues who, like, my grandma takes it and this and that, like, it's a very safe, very effective supplement to take. So I would encourage women to take it.
I'm doing my first loading phase right now.
Well, the loading phase is questionable. Like, I think to me like I kind of sort of roll my eyes at that. Like I'm more along the lines of like, take your little scoop, what is it, 5 grams or something like that? Just do that daily and your body's gonna eventually, catch up to that. Like the loading phase, I think is just like, I don't know the efficacy behind it. I'm sure I haven't read a creatine study in years. But I think a lot of the loading phase is a little bit more of like a little bit nefariousness from supplement companies to get people to buy more creatine. But so I just keep it simple and just say, listen, because I think the argument is like it takes the body a while to accumulate or to actually raise the creatine levels anyway to the point where it actually starts working. So, I mean, also this doesn't take into account, like if someone's eating a lot of red meat, they probably don't need to be taking creatine. But anyway, I think the loading phase is a little bit, I wouldn't say it's wrong or bad or you're causing any harm or anything. I just go along the lines of like, just put your scoop in your whatever, your protein shake or whatever on a daily basis, and you're gonna cover your bases.
Okay, cool.
And what was the other? You said the other question was what, a resource?
What's a resource that you'd recommend that you really enjoy from that's either motivational to you or educational?
I think the core. I'm going to recommend a course because this course has been probably the best course I've taken in 5+ years. Is the pregnancy and postpartum corrective exercise specialist course by Dr. Sarah Duvall. What I love about it, I mean, I know a lot of guys listening will and maybe even some female coaches too will roll their eyes like, oh, postpartum, blah blah. But since we're on the topic of training women, women have babies, surprise, and even if a woman isn't recently postpartum, once they're postpartum, they're always postpartum. So whether they had a baby 2 months ago, 2 years ago, or 10 years ago, that doesn't mean they can't have ramifications from that. And there's definitely things that you need to take into consideration when you're working with someone who is pregnant, of course, but also who is postpartum. And Sarah does a lovely job of like, it's the most detailed, it is phenomenal. And you're going to learn all about breathing patterns and diaphragmatic breathings and breathing positions and diastasis and pelvic floor and what I like about Sarah's approach is that she very much is a champion of lifting weights to fix shit. So it isn't just breathing drills and Kegels, and it's like she gets into the woods on like, okay, we need to actually lift some shit to like get you stronger, get you in better position, owning pelvic floor, getting the diaphragm on top of the pelvic. I mean, there's it's some deep stuff, but since we're on the topic of training women and et cetera, like in terms of like special circumstances, that course is the shit.
Amazing. Okay, I actually started that course. I am overwhelmed with the amount of PowerPoints that are in there. And
it's amazing. Yeah, and she has that. And did you get the updated course or the first course?
I got it like 2 years ago. So
yeah, so she just recently re-released the whole thing. She re-recorded everything, but also added to it. So it's like 30. I think it's 31 hours of content. So she took the original course, but then re-recorded the entire thing, but also added to it. So yeah, there's PowerPoints galore, but as you know, there's also like case studies, references to studies, like technique tutorials and breakdowns and progressions and regressions and what to do with a woman, first 6 months postpartum, what to do, what to avoid, then moving up, pelvic floor, all that stuff. It's crazy how detailed it is. But I think if you're a fitness professional, if you're a coach, male or female, you should definitely take that course.
Amazing. Well, now everyone knows. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Tony, thank you so much.
Oh, no worries. My pleasure.
I'll put in the show notes or caption where everyone can find you. And I just want to thank you again. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yes. I'm jealous of the consistent warm weather you get to enjoy. So it doesn't suck out there.
It doesn't suck too bad, no.
Yes, and hopefully we'll cross paths at some point. I'm sure I'll make it out there again at some point, and I don't know that maybe not this year, but next year.
Yeah, no, I would love to meet up, chat more, and just kind of pick your brain anytime. So let me know.
Sure. All right, Chelsea. We'll talk soon.
Hey, bye, Tony.
All right. Thank you.